The air in Dragonstone was heavy with salt and fire. Jon Snow stood before Daenerys Targaryen, the mother of dragons, breaker of chains, and the woman every lord whispered about in fear or admiration. She had just finished her speech, asking him to join her, bend the knee, and fight together. Her voice was calm but firm. Her eyes didn't blink. She was waiting, but Jon did not kneel. "I can't," he said, his voice rough, his body still tense from the long voyage. "I came here to ask for your help against the dead, not to join another fight for a throne." Daenerys raised an eyebrow, her face unreadable. "And yet you ask me to fight your war while refusing to support mine." Jon nodded slowly. "Because the war I'm fighting isn't about power. It's about survival. If we lose to the Night King, your throne won't matter." For a long moment there was silence. Tyrion Lannister shifted uncomfortably by her side. Varys looked away. The dragons outside roared softly, as if they sensed tension brewing. "You come into my home, ask for my armies, and insult my cause." Dany's voice was colder now. "I am the rightful queen of the 7 kingdoms." "I don't care who sits on the Iron Throne," Jon replied. "I care who survives long enough to see it." Her eyes narrowed. "Then perhaps we have nothing more to say." Jon turned without another word. Davos followed, confused and anxious, whispering, "My lord, are you sure?" "She has dragons." "I'm sure," Jon replied. "If she won't help us unless we kneel, then we go back. We fight alone." And so they left Dragonstone. The sails turned north again, back to Winterfell, back to snow and silence. But what Jon didn't know was this. Daenerys felt something when she looked at him. Not just pride or challenge, something deeper. His refusal burned her, not because it threatened her power, but because it wounded her pride. No man had stood that tall in front of her before. No man had said no and walked away. That night, as the fires in Dragonstone died down, Daenerys stood alone on the cliff, looking out over the black waves. Her dragon circled above. Tyrion came quietly. "He's not wrong," he said softly. "He is," she answered. "He just doesn't see it yet. He's not Cersei. He doesn't want to rule. He wants to protect." Daenerys didn't respond. She only stared out into the dark. In Winterfell, Sansa was waiting. She was not pleased when Jon returned without allies. "You left a queen with dragons and armies," she said, "and came back with nothing." "I came back with my honor," Jon said quietly. "I will not trade lives for thrones." Arya said nothing. But in her eyes there was worry. Beyond the wall the dead kept marching, and in Dragonstone Daenerys Targaryen began to change. The snow hit harder in the north. Cold winds sliced through Winterfell's stone walls like knives, and Jon Snow stood on the ramparts, staring out toward the endless white. Ghost sat beside him, quiet and alert. There was unrest in his heart. He had made his choice, to stand alone, to keep his pride. But now the cost of that choice felt heavier than a sword in the gut. Inside the castle, things weren't much better. Sansa's patience was wearing thin. "You should have bent the knee," she said bluntly one evening by the fire. "You let your pride speak louder than your duty." Jon looked at her, his jaw clenched. "And you think bending to a queen who doesn't understand the real threat would have saved us?" "She understands power," Sansa replied. "And in this world, power wins wars. Not stubborn northern honor." They were both quiet for a while. Outside, the howling wind made the torches flicker. "She's coming, you know," Sansa added finally. "Not with help, but not with kindness, but with fire." Jon didn't answer, but his gut twisted. He had seen that fire in Daenerys' eyes. Not just heat, but fury. Not just strength, but something colder, something dangerous. She wasn't like him. She didn't forgive, and he had refused her. Meanwhile, in Dragonstone, Daenerys Targaryen was no longer sitting idle. "Send a raven to the north," she told Tyrion. "Inform them I'm coming. Not as a savior, but as their rightful queen." Tyrion hesitated. "You're declaring war?" "No," she replied, her tone like steel. "I'm reminding them who rules. But the real enemy is still out there. The Night King." The North had a choice. Jon Snow had a choice. "He spat on it." Varys stepped forward quietly. "What happens when your dragons burn the North and there's no one left to rule?" Daenerys turned toward him, her silver hair catching the firelight. "They will kneel. or they will burn. By the time Daenerys's fleet reached White Harbor, Jon had already received the raven. He read the message twice, and his hands trembled slightly by the end. "She's not coming to help," he told Sansa. "She's coming to conquer." Sansa's face was pale, but calm. "We won't survive a war with dragons." "Then we need to speak with her again," Jon muttered. "Try to reason—" "No," Sansa cut in. "No more talking. You already tried. She's not like you. She was born in fire and raised in exile. You walk into her flames again, you won't walk out." Jon sighed. His chest was tight. The Night King was marching south. Winter was already here. And now the south was coming north. With fire and blood, Arya appeared from the shadows, as if summoned by the tension in the air. "So what's the plan, Lord Snow?" Jon looked at his sisters, then out the window toward the dark sky. "We hold the north. We prepare for the dead. And if Daenerys brings war before they arrive—" He trailed off, eyes hardening. "We'll deal with her." But Daenerys wasn't waiting either. Her dragons darkened the skies above the Dreadfort, and her army marched under black and red banners. Northerners in the region surrendered quickly, terrified by the beasts flying overhead. One by one, the outer houses began bending the knee, not out of loyalty, but out of fear. News traveled fast. "She's burning through the north like wildfire," said Tormund when he returned from scouting. "She's not here to talk, Jon. She's here to take everything." Jon slammed his fist against the table. The war he tried to avoid had arrived anyway. "She's making the same mistake everyone makes," he said bitterly. "She's fighting the wrong enemy." "Then maybe it's time we stop calling her queen," Arya said coldly. Sansa nodded. "She doesn't want allies. She wants subjects." In Dragonstone, Daenerys stood on the deck of her ship, watching the flames rise in the distance as her dragons torched another northern outpost that refused to kneel. "She could have had the North as a friend," Tyrion said quietly beside her. "Instead, you'll rule ashes and bones." Daenerys didn't look at him. "I offered him a chance. He refused." Tyrion hesitated, then asked, "And what if he dies in this? What will that make you?" Daenerys turned her face to the wind. Her eyes were cold. "It'll make me queen." And far beyond the wall, the Night King smiled without lips. The living were tearing themselves apart, just as he knew they would. Darkness moved quietly behind the veil of snow, and death, true death, was still coming. The snow fell harder now. Winterfell braced for war on two fronts, one wrapped in fire, the other cloaked in ice. Jon Snow stood in the great hall, his face grim, as he watched the bannermen argue amongst themselves. They weren't talking about the Night King. They were talking about Daenerys, about dragons, about fire raining down from the sky. "She burned Lord Cerwyn's holdfast," Lord Glover shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "His sons roasted alive in their own hall. That's not a queen, that's a tyrant." "She wants the North," Lady Mormont snapped back. "And she'll keep burning until she gets it." Jon's head throbbed. These were not the conversations he should be having. The dead were coming. He could feel it in his bones, the cold creeping deeper each night, like death breathing just beneath the snow. But Daenerys had changed the game. "She's making a mistake," Jon finally said, voice low. "She sees enemies where she should see allies. She burns where she should build. If we fight her now, we lose everything." "We've already lost," Sansa said, arms crossed. "You tried reason." She chose fire. That night Jon climbed the ramparts again, watching the horizon. A flicker of light danced in the far distance, flames far too close for comfort. She was moving fast, taking northern lands like a storm. And people were kneeling, not out of loyalty, but fear. Beside him, Arya appeared silently. "She'll come here next," she said. "I know. She won't show mercy." "Not after what you did." Jon looked down. "All I did was stand." Arya gave a half-smirk. "And some queens don't like when men stand." Jon shook his head. "I never wanted this." "Not war with her?" "Not war at all." Arya's voice hardened. "Well, she wants it. So either we break or we fight back." Jon didn't reply. Deep in his heart, he still hoped that something in Daenerys might remember why he'd refused her. That he wasn't her enemy, that he had only wanted to fight the real threat. But hope was a dying thing these days. Far to the south, Daenerys Targaryen stood beside her dragons as the last of House Hornwood's men bent the knee. "You'll be safe now," she told them, her voice soft, almost kind. "Under my rule, no harm will come to you." But the villagers didn't cheer. They didn't smile. They bowed low and stayed silent. She could feel the fear thick in the air. The smell of burned flesh still lingered from the last resistance. Behind her, Tyrion watched with a worried brow. "This isn't how we win hearts." "I don't need hearts," Daenerys said without looking back. "I need obedience." Tyrion lowered his voice. "You're becoming what you hated." Daenerys turned then, slowly. Her eyes burned like her dragon's. "No, I'm becoming what this world needs. A ruler who doesn't beg, doesn't compromise. I offered Jon peace. He chose pride. And what if he chooses war next? Then I end it." 3 days later, her army reached the outer walls of Winterfell. Jon stood atop the battlements, heart pounding, as 3 dragons circled above like vultures. The ground shook with the march of unsullied boots. The banners of House Targaryen unfurled in the icy wind. "She came," Arya whispered beside him. Eyes narrowed. "And she brought hell with her," said Ser Davos. Watching the sky with dread, Jon breathed deep. "Open the gates," Sansa grabbed his arm. "You can't walk into her camp. She wants you dead. She wanted a king to kneel. I'm giving her a man who's still trying to make peace. You'll be walking into a fire," she hissed. Jon looked at her with calm, tired eyes. "Then let it burn me. But I won't let the North die fighting a war we don't need." Outside the gates, Jon rode alone toward Daenerys's camp under a white flag. The Unsullied let him pass without a word. Tyrion met him first, looking older, wearier. "She's not in a forgiving mood," he said carefully. "I'm not here for forgiveness. I'm here to stop a war." Tyrion gave a weak smile. "Then let's hope fire listens." Inside the tent, Daenerys stood by a war table, one hand resting on a carved wooden dragon. When she saw Jon, her jaw tensed. "You have some nerve." Jon bowed slightly. "I didn't come to fight. You brought war by denying me." "I brought honesty." Daenerys stepped closer, her voice shaking now. "You looked me in the eye and refused to bend the knee. Do you know what that made me look like? Weak, mocked. A queen begging a northern bastard for scraps." Jon met her gaze. "And yet I'm still here asking you to stop this, before more burn. Before we forget who the real enemy is." For a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Pain, regret. But then it hardened. "You're not a hero. Jon, you're a fool. And you're not a conqueror, Daenerys. You're a destroyer." The silence between them was louder than dragons. She turned away. "Leave, before I change my mind." Jon stood there for 1 second longer, staring at the woman he had once admired, maybe even begun to care for. But that woman was buried now, beneath the ashes of her own rage. He turned and walked out, and high beyond the wall. The snow turned black. The Night King had crossed it. Winterfell had no idea, because they were all too busy watching the wrong war. The days that followed were filled with silence, but not peace. Daenerys had pulled her army back 1/2 mile from Winterfell, not out of mercy, but calculation. She could burn the castle, take it in hours, but she wanted Jon to squirm. She wanted the North to kneel, not out of diplomacy, but surrender. Her dragons roared above the clouds, circling like shadows of judgment. Jon Snow returned to the castle gates that night, his face grim and heart heavier than ever. The people of Winterfell watched him quietly, eyes filled with fear. They had heard the stories, entire keeps scorched to the ground, northern lords roasted in their halls. No one was calling her a savior anymore. "She gave you a chance to leave?" Sansa asked, standing by the fire. He nodded. "She still thinks she's right." "She's not," Arya said from the shadows. "She's lost in her own fire." Jon looked between his sisters. "Then we need to prepare." "For battle?" Davos asked. "Against dragons?" Jon's voice was low but firm. "For survival. We're not fighting for pride anymore. We're fighting to keep people alive. That means fortify the crypts, ration food, reinforce the walls. We defend Winterfell with everything we have." Arya gave a quiet nod. "If she brings fire, we bring blood. But no one had answers for the other war, the real war, the one no one could see, yet all could feel in their bones. The dead were close. Closer than anyone knew. At night, Jon dreamed of ice. He stood in a white wasteland, nothing but snow and silence. And there in the distance, he saw them, the dead, endless, marching toward him. And in the middle of them stood the Night King, tall, cold, smiling with his dead blue eyes. Jon awoke in a cold sweat, heart pounding. He knew the storm was here. Daenerys sat in her war tent the next morning, pacing. Her hands were clenched, her thoughts louder than her dragons. "He came to beg," she said to Tyrion. "No," Tyrion corrected softly. "He came to stop a war. He came to insult me. Again." Her voice shook. "He thinks he's noble, that his real enemy is more important than unity. But what is unity without loyalty?" Tyrion looked tired. "Perhaps he sees loyalty as earned, not demanded." Daenerys turned sharply. "I am the rightful queen." "No one's questioning that," Tyrion said gently. "But they're questioning how you rule." She turned away, her jaw trembling. "They hate me. They fear you, and fear wins wars." Tyrion frowned. "But it doesn't win peace." 2 nights later, Jon was on the wall again, Ghost beside him. The sky was too still. The snow fell without wind. A wrong kind of silence. Then he heard it, a horn, one long mournful sound. From the trees, then a second, Jon's breath caught. His heart froze. 3 horns, the dead were here. He ran down the steps, shouting, "To arms! The dead are here!" Bells rang. The courtyard exploded into motion. Soldiers scrambled. Archers climbed to the walls. Sansa stood frozen for a moment, then took charge. "Get the children to the crypts." "Block the gates!" Arya was already gone, likely hunting in the dark. Jon looked out beyond the wall. Nothing. Then figures, dozens, hundreds, then thousands, shadows, pale faces, silent screams. The dead had arrived at Winterfell, but something was wrong. They weren't attacking. They were waiting. Then Jon saw him, standing atop a small hill of snow, the Night King, not moving, watching, waiting, and then, like a cruel gift from the gods, Daenerys' dragons screamed above them. The dead looked up. Daenerys was here, but not to help. She hadn't come to save Winterfell. She had come to take it. Jon ran down to the courtyard. As her dragons descended, unsullied, storming from the woods behind the dead. For a moment, everyone was confused. Who was who? Friend or enemy? Then the fire fell. The left tower exploded in flames as Drogon's breath melted stone. Soldiers screamed. People ran in chaos. Daenerys thought the dead were Jon's trick. She was burning both. Jon grabbed a horn and shouted, "Stop! They're real. The dead are real." But she didn't hear, or worse, she didn't believe. In the chaos, Arya emerged from the shadows, blood on her face. "You brought her here," she shouted. "And now she's killing us." Jon felt it, the collapse of everything he had tried to hold together. The North was being crushed between fire and death. He had one choice left. He had to face her, not as a knight, not as a lord, but as the one man who could still stop her, even if it meant losing everything. Smoke blackened the sky above Winterfell. Fire roared on one side, ice loomed on the other, and in the middle stood Jon Snow, his heart split like the castle walls around him. Drogon's shadow circled overhead again before unleashing another river of fire across the ramparts. The screams that followed tore through Jon's soul. These were his people, northerners, innocents, burned alive by the very woman he once thought might save them. He pushed through the chaos, dodging falling stone, ducking past the terrified soldiers, and running straight into the heart of madness. The courtyard was littered with corpses, some burned, others frozen. The Night King hadn't attacked yet. He was letting Daenerys do his work, and she was. Arya appeared beside Jon, face streaked with ash and blood, her blade red from cutting through whites and unsullied alike. "She's lost it," she hissed. "She's burning everyone. She thinks we betrayed her." Arya grabbed his tunic. "She's a butcher now, Jon. If you don't stop her, I will." Jon pulled away. No, this ends with me. Arya stared at him for a second, her eyes wild. Then do it, or I will carve my way through her dragons. Up above, Daenerys stood on Drogon's back, hair wild in the wind, eyes blazing with wrath. She could see Winterfell burning. She could see Jon running through the smoke. And it only fueled her anger. He had made her into this. His betrayal. His refusal. His northern pride. Tyrion climbed up the ridge, where she had landed briefly to regroup. His face was full of ash, but his voice held urgency. "This isn't saving the realm," he shouted. "This is madness." Daenerys turned to him slowly. "They rejected their queen." "They didn't reject you. You never gave them the chance. You came with fire, not peace. I came with justice. You came with vengeance." Daenerys' hands shook. "Jon let this happen. He warned them, but still stood in my way." Tyrion stepped closer. "He still believes in you." Her eyes glistened, but she looked away. "Then he's a fool." Jon reached the godswood as Drogon landed on the far end, Daenerys descending from the beast like a goddess of death. Her boots crunched the snow. Her face hard with fury and heartbreak, she stopped when she saw him, there in the sacred grove. Beneath the weirwood's bleeding face, Jon, Daenerys, for a moment silence. Even the war outside seemed to fade, the screams muffled by falling ash. "You came to fight?" she asked, stepping closer. "No," Jon said. "I came to end it." Her voice cracked slightly. "You could have ended it when you bent the knee. I couldn't kneel to fire that destroys the people I swore to protect." Daenerys' jaw clenched. "You chose them. I chose what was right." Tears welled in her eyes, but they did not fall. "Then you're my enemy." Jon's voice was barely a whisper. "You were never supposed to be this." Daenerys closed the distance between them, eyes searching his. "I was made for this. You think peace is soft, but peace comes through power. And I am the only one strong enough to burn away the old world." Jon's heart shattered then, not because she was wrong, but because somewhere deep down, she believed it and she wasn't going to stop, ever. He stepped closer, slowly, gently. He took her hand. She didn't pull away. "Then let's build it together," Jon whispered. "No more death." Her eyes softened. "You'd stand beside me?" He nodded slowly. She leaned in, resting her forehead to his. "And Jon Snow, bastard of Winterfell, Lord Commander, the man who died and rose again, did the one thing he never wanted to do." He slid the dagger between her ribs, her breath caught. "Eyes wide, I'm sorry," Jon whispered. She stumbled back, blood staining the snow red. Drogon roared from outside, feeling her pain. Jon caught her as she fell, gently lowering her to the snow. "I loved you," she whispered, the last breath leaving her lips. "I know," he said. And then silence. The sky shook. A deafening roar echoed over Winterfell as Drogon landed near the godswood. The beast let out a scream that split the heavens, fire blazing from his mouth into the air. He saw her, he saw the blood, he saw Jon, and the world paused. Jon stood still, unarmed, his heart bare. Drogon stepped forward, sniffed her body, then looked at Jon, their eyes locked. Man and beast. Jon didn't flinch, he was ready, but Drogon didn't kill him. Instead, he turned to the Iron Throne, or what remained of it in his mind, the symbol of all this madness, all this death, and he burned it. He burned everything. The godswood turned into a storm of flame and ash, and then Drogon lifted Daenerys' body in his claws and flew into the night sky, vanishing into the cold. Winterfell stood in smoke and silence. The queen was dead, but so was the last hope of peace. The Night King, watching from afar, finally moved. The dead began to march. The fires of Daenerys' fury had barely gone cold when a deeper chill fell over Winterfell, not from sorrow, not from regret, but from the silent, creeping march of death. Jon Snow stood alone in the godswood, ash falling like snow around him. The place where he had killed her still bled red into the earth. Her voice echoed in his mind, soft and warm, the last trace of what could have been. But there was no time left to mourn. A rider galloped through the broken gates. his horse half dead with exhaustion. "They're here," he screamed. "The dead. They're at last, Hearth. The Night King rides with them." Jon's breath caught. His hands curled into fists. It was too soon. He rushed to the main hall, the map table in ruins from dragonfire. The lords and ladies left alive gathered in panic. Sansa, face pale but composed. Arya, sharpening her blade silently. Sir Davos, pacing like a man with no prayers left. "We don't have time to grieve," Jon said, voice heavy. "The Night King is coming." He waited for her to die. "Now he moves." "The gods are mocking us," Lord Manderley muttered. "We lost half our forces to her, and now we face him with ashes." "No," Jon said. "We face him with whatever we have left." Arya looked up. "And what exactly is that?" "A shattered castle, a broken army, and a dead queen." Sansa looked at Jon, her expression unreadable. "You did what you had to do. I did what no one else would," Jon said quietly. "And now I have to do it again." That night, the snow turned black again, not from ash this time, but from the whites marching toward Winterfell like a tide of silence. Their eyes glowed like ghostly stars in the distance. Leading them was the Night King, mounted on an undead Viserion, blue flames leaking from the beast's jaw. The sight nearly broke Jon. It had once been hers, everything she had built. Corrupted now! He stood atop the walls, armor scraped, sword on his back. He turned to the soldiers gathered, the Northmen, the free folk, the battered unsullied who had stayed behind, confused, leaderless after Daenerys' death. "You don't have to fight," Jon told them. "But if you run, there's nowhere left to hide. The dead don't stop. They don't rest. They don't care who you followed, who you loved, or what name you shouted." He looked up into the falling snow. "I killed the queen. But if we die tonight, she dies for nothing." There was no roar, no cheers, just silence, and swords drawn. The dead came with the dawn. They swarmed like insects, crawling over the outer walls, crashing through burning barricades, and shattering the first line of defense. Whites tore through soldiers like paper, clawing and biting with no fear, no pain. Tormund led a squad of wildlings, screaming like madmen, fire axes in hand. "Let's give these corpses a taste of Northman steel." Arya vanished into the chaos, a shadow among shadows, blade flashing like lightning in the storm. Jon fought like a man already dead, leaping from wall to wall, cutting through whites as if they were extensions of his guilt. Every kill felt like punishment. Every death felt like a failure. Above, Viserion roared, sweeping through the sky with a trail of blue flame. One blast tore through the west tower, sending stone and men flying. Sansa and the civilians were in the crypts now. But Jon knew even stone couldn't protect them forever. The dead were already clawing at the gates, and then, through the smoke and fire, the Night King entered Winterfell. He walked slowly, confidently, his pale eyes locked onto the heart of the battle. He raised one hand, and the corpses of the freshly fallen began to rise again, unsullied Northerners, even those Jon had just cut down moments ago. They stood again, lifeless, soulless, now fighting against their own. Jon screamed in rage and charged toward him. The Night King didn't flinch. They met near the heart tree. Jon swung Longclaw. The Night King blocked it with his ice blade. Sparks flew. Snow melted beneath their feet as steel met death again and again. Each blow from the Night King was like a hammer of winter. Jon barely kept his footing, and just when Jon found an opening, just when his blade touched the Night King's chest, he smiled and blew him back with a wave of pure, freezing magic. Jon hit the weirwood tree hard and collapsed. Breath stolen. The Night King stepped forward and raised his hand one final time. In the crypts, Sansa heard the screams go silent. And then, a sound she feared most, stone cracking. The dead in the crypts were waking up. Winterfell was falling, and Jon Snow, its last hope, lay broken beneath the weirwood. But death was not done yet, not with him, not with Westeros. The crypts of Winterfell had always been a place of silence, where old kings rested in stone, their swords laid across their laps, guarding the realm even in death. But that night, the dead did not rest. As the Night King raised his hand above the battlefield, something ancient stirred beneath the earth. Bones creaked, stone cracked, and the dead of House Stark, long buried, long forgotten, began to rise. Sansa's scream was drowned by the rumble of collapsing walls as statues shattered and skeletal arms broke through the dust. A long-dead Stark lord lunged at a crying child. A former lady of Winterfell, now little more than a skull and rags, clawed toward the survivors, hiding in the shadows. Sansa grabbed a rusted blade from a fallen guard and swung with all the fear in her bones. She wasn't Arya. She had never trained for this. But tonight she fought. "We have to get out," she yelled. "There's no sanctuary left." Jilly clutched her baby, eyes wild with terror. "Where?" Sansa looked toward the stone stairs, blocked by rubble. She turned to the far tunnel, the one sealed off generations ago. "We go deeper, but it's a dead end." Sansa didn't answer. She just ran, because death was behind her, and maybe something else waited ahead. Above ground, Winterfell was no longer a castle. It was a graveyard. Whites climbed over the ramparts. Fires burned uncontrolled. Screams came from every corner. The North had never seen such terror, not even during the last long night. Arya danced through the shadows, her blade dripping with blackened blood. Her face was ash, her breath ragged. She had been killing all night, and still they came. She turned a corner and nearly slammed into Samwell Tarly, swinging a sword with both hands like he had no idea how he was still alive. "They're everywhere," Sam gasped. "Keep moving," Arya said, grabbing him by the cloak. "Stick with me." They moved together, slicing through corpses that didn't know they were dead. And still the snow kept falling. Arya's eyes glanced toward the godswood, and she saw him, Jon, on the ground, unmoving. Her heart stopped. The Night King stood over Jon Snow, sword raised, his cold smile growing wider. This wasn't just victory. This was personal. The man who defied fire and fate was about to die like any other mortal. But before he could strike, a roar shattered the sky. Not Drogon, not Viserion, a different roar. Older. From the blizzard above, a shadow dove down. Ghost. The direwolf slammed into the Night King with a force that cracked the earth. Fangs sank into frozen armor. The Night King stumbled, caught off guard. Ghost howled again, not just in pain, but in fury. And from that opening, Jon pulled himself up. His hand found Longclaw. His breath was fire in his lungs. He charged. Blades met again. This time, Jon fought not as a prince, not as a bastard, but as death's last challenger. Their swords clashed in a storm of frost and flame. Ghost circled, bloodied but alive. But the Night King was no man. His strikes were too perfect, his defense too unnatural. Jon faltered, and just as the Night King knocked Longclaw from his hand, ready to deliver the final blow, a blur moved through the trees, a whisper of death. Arya, she leapt from the branches like a shadow made of vengeance. The Night King turned, just in time to grab her by the throat, but she dropped the dagger from her right hand, caught it in her left, and drove it upward. Valyrian steel, right through the eye. The Night King's body froze, his hand loosened. He looked into Arya's face, and shattered into 1,000 shards of ice. Silence fell, then like dominoes, the dead dropped, every white, every monster. Even Viserion above let out a final groan before falling from the sky like a broken star. It was over. The morning came slowly. The sun, pale and red, over the snowy fields. Winterfell stood, broken, bleeding, burning beneath, but not lost. Jon stood in the godswood, surrounded by bodies, silence and ash. Arya sat nearby, holding her dagger, hands shaking. "You saved us," he said softly. She didn't look at him. "We all did." Sansa emerged from the crypts hours later with soot on her face and blood on her hands. She hugged Jon without a word, and Ghost, torn and limping, laid beside the weirwood roots, watching with one good eye. Later, as the dead were burned in great pyres and the living gathered in mourning, Tyrion approached Jon with tired eyes. "She's gone," he said. Jon nodded. "She died believing she could fix this world." Jon didn't answer. Tyrion sighed. "What happens now?" Jon looked at the flames and said, I don't know. The pyres burned for 3 days. Winterfell had survived, but at a cost the realm would never forget. The godswood was quiet now, its sacred tree blackened with soot. Snow still fell, but it didn't feel like winter anymore. It felt like grief. Jon Snow stood by the largest pyre, the firelight dancing across his worn face. Around him were the dead, friends, allies, strangers, all sacrificed in a war that should never have needed to be fought. He watched as the flames consumed what was left of Theon Greyjoy, Jorah Mormont, Beric Dondarrion, and hundreds of others. He said no words. There were none left. Arya stood beside him, her expression blank, her eyes bloodshot. "He was going to kill you," she said finally. "I couldn't let that happen." Jon looked at her with something between pride and sorrow. "You saved the world, Arya." "No," she whispered. "I killed a monster. The world is still the same." She turned and walked away. Inside Winterfell's ruined hall, the last lords and ladies of the realm gathered. Those who had not burned or frozen had come now to decide what came next. Tyrion, face lined with exhaustion, took the center. "The war is over. But Westeros is not saved. We have no king, no queen, and no clear future." Lord Glover slammed a hand on the table. "The North should be free. We've bled enough for southern wars. And yet the South burned too," said Samwell Tarly, stepping forward, his voice shaking but firm. "We all lost something. We all fought the same dead. We need to stand together now, or fall apart tomorrow." Gendry, standing awkwardly among them as the newly legitimized Lord of Storm's End, nodded. "Who rules now?" All eyes turned to Jon, but he didn't speak. He stood in the corner, arms crossed, face unreadable. "I'm not the king," he said. "I never wanted a throne, but you're Aegon Targaryen," Sam reminded him. "The true heir?" Jon shook his head. "Names don't matter anymore. Thrones. They destroy everyone who sits on them." Tyrion stepped forward. "Then who should lead?" Silence fell, then a voice cut through it. Sansa Stark. Everyone turned. It was Arya. She held the North together when no one else could. She didn't chase thrones or burn cities. She protected her people. She deserves more than any of us to lead. Sansa stood still, stunned. "I am of the North, and the North will remain free." A murmur ran through the room. But she added, stepping forward, "Westeros needs someone it can trust. Someone who doesn't want power but understands the weight of it." Her eyes met Jon's. "You don't want to rule." "That's exactly why you should." Jon looked away. "I can't," he said. "Not after what I did." "You ended a tyrant," Tyrion said. "You didn't kill Daenerys. You saved Westeros." Jon's hands trembled. She believed she was saving it too. That night, Jon sat alone by the godswood, Longclaw resting beside him. The weirwood's red leaves swayed gently in the wind. For a moment, he closed his eyes and heard voices, his father's, Maester Aemon's, even Jorah Mormont's, all men of duty, all men who gave everything and were left with nothing. "I don't deserve peace," he said to no one. "You never did," came a quiet voice. It was Arya. She sat beside him, pulling her cloak tight. "So what now?" she asked. "I can't rule. I can't stay. The South will never forgive me." "The North barely survived me," Arya nodded. "Then leave. Go where no one knows your name. Be free. You've earned that much." Jon looked at her. "And what about you?" She smiled faintly. "I'm not staying either. I've seen enough of war. I want to see what's west of Westeros." They sat together in silence. A week later, Jon Snow rode through the gates of Castle Black. Ghost ran beside him, limping but loyal. Tormund waited with a grin. "You came back then," Jon nodded. "No crown, no title." Jon glanced up at the wall, endless and white, just snow. They rode through the gate together, the North stretching out in front of them like a clean slate. Sansa Stark was crowned queen in the North. She ruled with reason and steel. Under her, the North remained strong and free. Arya sailed west with a small crew, chasing whatever lay beyond the maps. Bran the Broken was chosen to rule the 6 kingdoms, calm, quiet, unbending in purpose. Tyrion remained as his hand, forever seeking balance. The Iron Throne was never rebuilt, and Daenerys Stormborn was never spoken of in songs. No statues, no legacy, only ashes. And Jon Snow, once king, once bastard, once everything, walked into the woods beyond the wall, leaving behind the realm of men, no longer bound by oaths, no longer broken by duty, just a man, a wolf and the cold, and for the first time in his life, freedom.